Hap a hap. Betty, there's a little bit of salmon left here. Do you want to eat it? No, you can have your... You're just going to sleep.
Let's get a tiny piece of something on the bottom lip.
Oh, we'll get it off when we get him in the tub. Okay, I don't like the music of the 50s, I've decided. If this is what it is, this is horrible.
I don't think it's all like this, though.
Well, my 50s mix consists of the standard stuff. Basically, it's anything in my library that was released in the 50s, but also I have the Billboard Top 100 songs from every year, from about 1946 through about 1986. And to me, that's always one of those funny things is what, like, if you go to an 80s party, most of the music that you hear played is, there's basically about 3 hours worth of music that people consider to be 80s music. Mm. And if you went to an 80s party, you wouldn't hear I Did It All for Love, or you wouldn't hear necessarily the Macarena, or you wouldn't hear, I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff. And maybe I'm actually,
well, I think the Macarena was the 90s, yeah.
But there's still a bunch of pop music of every year that just people wash over because they forget. And I'm curious as we go forward into digital how much that's going to change. But a lot of this 50s
well, it'll
stuff.
also change because now you can have a satellite radio and, you know, you're not spinning up and down the dial anymore. There's, you know, known channels with no commercials, and you can choose what you like to listen to and pretty much leave it at that. And there are, you know, many options, but
those stations can still break new music. So the fact that there is a heavy metal station, several heavy metal stations on satellite, still means that Iron Maiden could put out a new single.
yes.
And they could sell a lot. But it may not compete with the number of people who are still using regular media, notably teenagers, as plugged in as we think we are. Teenagers still vary pretty wildly, and they have always been more susceptible to advertising. And so when Bieber puts out a new thing, or One Direction puts out a new thing, and maybe that's a little bit young, but there's still, you know, there's still a lot of buying power there.
Well, and the commercials thing cracks me up because I don't have TV. I mean, I have a TV, but the only thing I watch on it is DVDs. And if I watch Netflix, there's no ads. So, like the other day when we went to Dreamy Weenie and there was a commercial on, I was like,
Yeah.
a commercial?
Happens to me at playing games all the time.
Wow.
After there were conversations, somebody's like,
I didn't even, and sometimes I'll be like, I didn't even know that thing exists. Whatever it is out in the universe that they're advertising for, I didn't even know such a thing was there. And that's like what I'll do sometimes when my mom and dad will be watching something and they'll turn the volume off and I go home to visit. I'm like, no, I want to hear the commercial because I haven't heard it.
Right.
It doesn't last very long. And then I'm done with the commercials. But sometimes it's fun to hear them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or I'll stop mid-conversation with somebody in a bar because the commercial just cracked me up. And inevitably somebody nearby watches regular television and they're like, that commercial's been up for a couple of years. I'm like, oh well.
Oops.
It's still funny. You're like, yeah, whatever.
Oh, man, I'm so tired.
But the other thing for me when you listen to, especially a 50s mix like this, is it really highlights how revolutionary Elvis Presley was.
He really was, yes.
Because if this is what was the norm, and then he...
Well, there were plenty of people making that music, because Elvis stole a whole lot of that music from blues musicians and from black musicians all over the South.
Most of which you either had to go in and buy race records to get,
right,
or tune in to a radio station that you may not even know existed because it wasn't part of your culture.
Right.
But also Jerry Lee Lewis, the Big Bopper, there were other people who were doing similar stuff. He was just much better at it.
Oh, yes.
But it really is, it's kind of like, I've told you about hearing a very good live recording of Jimi Hendrix at Understanding.
Right.
Well, the famous story of Eric Clapton turning to whoever and saying, "We're out of a job."
Right. Yes, and I'm touching my story of I'd heard Tom Petty my entire life, but then happened to see him live at a bridge school benefit and went, oh, now I understand.
But he's more of I think of him as more middle of the road, sort of really good. It's sort of like comfort food.
He's not phenomenal, but he's such a good. He puts on such a good show. Mm-hmm. It's not that he's like outrageously technical musician, just such a good show. Oh, little man.
Does somebody want these avocados that have been?
Oh, I will eat them if Habs can eat them for sure.
Yeah, and you can eat the other half of Hap's salmon, and somebody can eat my half of this salmon because I'm full. My tummy hurts.
I'm pretty full too.
Oh, and then there's that whole other fillet in there that we can.
So the salmon will laminate, right?
Oh yeah. Hap a hap. Let me know.
The scariest concussion story I know, and I don't know if I told you this, then here's concussions. When Francesca was in 5th grade, I came to pick her up at her Catholic school. And she was in the after school program, so I don't remember what time it was, 4:30 or 5. I picked her up and she's sitting on a bench, which she never was doing. She was always playing. So I picked her up and she's sitting on a bench, and she didn't come run to get me or anything like I did. And I said, hey, not feeling well. She's like, oh, I hit my head. And I said, oh, okay. Was it bad? She goes, no, I just ran into, I don't remember what his name is, one of the kids. I was like, oh, okay. So we get in the car. She's sitting in the back seat, and she falls asleep.
Uh-oh.
And I said, Francesca. And I said, can you tell me what happened at school?
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I was running, I ran into somebody, and I fell on the blacktop. So I called the school up, and I said, hey, I picked Francesca up. I talked to the supervisor. Like, when I checked her out, I had to sign. Nobody told me she fell. They said, oh, yes, we did an accident report. Somebody was supposed to call you at 3:30. I said, nobody called me at 3:30. I said, what happened? They said she was running. She ran into one of the 8th graders really, really hard. They ran, and she went and flipped back and hit her head on the blacktop. I said, okay. I said, did anybody call the doctor? They said, no. She got up. She got right up. So the 8th grader happens to be the big brother of one of her friends who's in 5th grade. So I turn the car around and start to go straight to the hospital. And I call up and I said, and I can't remember his name now. I said, can you put so-and-so on the phone? And he's like, oh, Miss Laura. He said, are you guys at the hospital? Is Francesca okay? And I said, can you tell me what happened? And he said, yeah, we were running. I said, I was running, she was running. She ran right into me. He said, and she just went and slammed back and slammed her head into the blacktop. I said, well, did she pass out? And he goes, he said she closed her eyes for a minute or something and then woke up and then shook her head. He said she was really nauseous. She had to go in the bathroom. I think she threw up. I was like, okay. Turns out she had a major concussion. She was in the hospital until the next morning. She was out of school for a week. My mom's like, you need to sue those. And I said, if I sue them, I said, it's a small little Catholic school, I said, they'll go under. I said, what I want is the person who was supposed to call me to be fired.
You could have sued them. They have insurance for that sort of stuff.
Well, and I didn't want to have the whole school to be, I said, all I want is them to fix the system.
Right.
And for her to be fired.
Was she fired?
She was fired. She was fired. And I got all sorts of grief from the other parents because she had been there forever. And I'm like, I don't care.
She was grossly negligent.
I said, do you know what could have happened to my child? I said, fire her.
That seems to be a theme. Kristen Tavernetti went to go pick up her daughter Jackie from Montessori day school. Jackie's like...
Well, this was Catholic school, but not
Jackie's
Montessori
like 2.
School, mm-hmm.
And Kristen goes to pick her up, and there's a huge cut on Jackie's face. Huge cut, bleeding, blood everywhere. And Jackie's just sort of sitting there. And this had happened like hours before. And nobody called her, and she has a great big scar on her face from it.
Did somebody know?
Oh, yeah, they knew. They just didn't call her. They knew. Enough of our charming conversation.